Hello, everyone. I am so excited in this exact moment that I am recording the podcast because I just met with my publisher and Grounded Wildness is at the printer. This feels very official. It's like completely out of my hands. No more changes, no more formatting, nothing. It is like at the printer getting printed, which is so exciting. And I know I said last time, and if you listen to last week's podcast on perfecting, I thought I would have a release date by now. I don't have that because the reason is I have to get a proof from the printer, like an actual physical paper proof. And once I approve that, then we can have a release date. So it should be a couple of weeks and then I will have an official release date for you. I didn't know about that step, which is why it's being added in there. But this is, it's like getting real. It's getting fun. It's getting exciting. And I'm so ready for you to have this. I'm so ready for you to have Grounded Wildness in your hands. And in fact, this morning I was a guest on someone's podcast. Podcast won't come out until October, but she had read, I sent her a PDF of the book to prepare in advance of the podcast. And she read the introduction and she was just like, Heather, like just the introduction made me think about so much. And like, I cannot wait to read the rest of the book. And this is so good. And it's so exciting. And she like literally was taking notes just in the introduction of the book, which is amazing. So I will link to both the Grounded Wildness presale, but also put a link to read the introduction. You can also, if you like listening to the podcast, I read the introduction out loud on this podcast way back in May. So you can go and look at that as well. But it's a quick, short introduction. So I'll link to that in the show notes in case you want to read it and get the book on presale. And then you will be the very first to get it if you get it on presale. Like if I get it before the official release date, it's going in the mail to you. So it's exciting. This has been a long time in the making, like 2 active years, plus probably another year of taking notes. So it's been like a 3-year process to get the book out there. And now it's almost here. So it's really exciting. Yeah. And I'm feeling that right now. So I might be bringing like a high level of energy to the podcast today because I'm feeling that, but that's okay. I'll put those links in the show notes so you can go check them out. And now let's get into the 4th way of performing. So far we've covered proving, pleasing, and perfecting. Those were the first 3 episodes, the last 3 episodes that we did. And what those all had in common, those 3, is that they were all about conforming. So conforming to the rules that are handed to you, conforming to expectations and standards about how you're supposed to achieve, what you're supposed to look like, how you're supposed to show up in the world, what it means to be a good woman and employee and leader and student, and all of these expectations on you. Proving, pleasing, and perfecting is all about trying to, at least, or feeling like you should be conforming to them, like trying to reach those standards. And even if you aren't, maybe you feel that, or you're trying to prove your worth towards getting to those standards. You're trying to perfect your way to them. You're trying to please your way to reaching those standards about what a woman is supposed to be like. And that's what they all have in common: conforming. This last one, rebelling, is the opposite side of that. It's still performing. It's still another kind of performing, but instead of conforming to the rules, you are pushing against them, but in a way that still isn't you. Like you're pushing against these rules, you're rebelling against them, but not because it's authentic to you, just to break the rules. So you're essentially breaking the rules on purpose as opposed to with purpose. And that with purpose is the Grounded Wildness side of things. So that's the difference here, is like rebelling, you're breaking the rules on purpose just to break the rules. And I want to give you some examples. And I will tell you, this one, compared to proving, pleasing, and perfecting, I don't think rebelling is as common. I don't think it's as common. It definitely isn't as common in my life. Like looking back, I think I probably could have rebelled more as a teenager and some of my younger years to push boundaries a little bit more and get out of that proving, pleasing, perfecting mentality that I lived in for so long. Like there were definitely times when I made grounded wildness types of decisions, especially in my career and my young adulthood, but they weren't really for the most part, they weren't really rebelling. Like they just truly felt like the right decision to me. So I could have, I think, rebelled a little bit more in order to push against that proving, pleasing, and perfecting and just, yeah, get out of the PPP rut, the proving, pleasing, and perfecting rut that I was in for so long. So it's a little bit harder for me to talk to examples of rebelling, but there was one that I have experienced recently that I wanted to bring forward. And then I'll give you a few other kind of, random examples that aren't necessarily mine personally. Because I want you to start recognizing, like, are you rebelling at all in your life? Like, are there places where you are breaking boundaries and breaking the rules just to break them, even if they don't actually feel good and aligned and grounded in you? And so here's my example. My example recently, this was like in the last 6 months. So when I started my business, I really listened to all of the business experts. Like I didn't know how to run a business. I knew how to do the content of my business, but I had no clue how to run a business. So it made sense that I was like voraciously listening to podcasts and following all their advice. And I also took it a little bit too much to heart. Like this was the proving, pleasing, and perfecting. I was like, I'm going to do all the things. I'm going to do exactly what the experts tell me to do and all of that stuff, all the proving, pleasing, and perfecting. Then when I finally stopped to say like, wait, first of all, where am I proving, pleasing, and perfecting? If I took the overachiever out of this, like what would I actually want to do? But then really like, how do I want to show up? How do I want to run my business? I don't want to like run my business based on gross marketing tactics of like rubbing salt into your wounds and totally pushing out pain points and like just pushing on them over and over and over again and creating false scarcity, which is a lot of the like of traditional marketing writing. I didn't want to do that. I did it for a while at the beginning of my business. It didn't feel good. I didn't like it. Other things I did at the beginning of my business were like running Facebook ads and having a Facebook group and having a million different email chains and opt-ins to join my email list. And like, yeah, I still have some opt-ins to join my email list, but I'm not like shoving out quizzes and all of this stuff that's really complicated. And let's be frank, I hated. So I finally stopped and was like, whoa, okay. How do I want to run my business? What's going to work well for me? Those questions are grounded wildness type of questions. The funny thing was, like, I started almost shifting too far in the opposite direction where I'm like, okay, I listened to everyone else for way too long. Now I am only going to listen to me. I'm not going to have processes. I'm not going to like buy into systems. I'm not going to listen to ideas or learn about like, how are other speakers finding business or how are other people doing what they do? Like, I basically was just like, nope, done with it all. Like, I'm not going to listen to anyone except myself. And there really should have been an and in there. Really would have been helpful. It's like, essentially, I was rebelling against processes. I was rebelling against systems. I was rebelling against learning from other people who are in similar situations from me, taking in feedback, or not even feedback, but really ideas from them. I rebelled against it all. And then I was like, wait a second, I might have some things to learn from people. And just because I ask a question or listen to a podcast or hear their story, or even if they directly give me advice or tell me that I should do something, I don't have to do it, but it's going to be helpful for me to listen and then decide, like, take in the information, take in the feedback, take in the ideas, learn from other people, and then sift through it and say, okay, what's actually going to work for me? That's like the grounded wildness thing. But for a while, I was just like, I was pushing. I was like, nope, I don't want to follow what other people are doing. I only want to listen to myself. And that was really only half of the equation, because obviously there's a lot to learn from other people. And I can sift through it myself and say, what's going to work? Like, instead of just taking it all on, I get to make that decision about what's going to work and what doesn't. So since then, I've opened myself way more up to like, okay, are there systems that I can put into my business instead of just running totally on intuition? where can I put in some systems and structures that will actually give me more freedom in my business and allow me to follow my intuition even more? And asking myself questions like that, meeting with other speakers and hearing their stories and learning from them and sharing ideas in a two-way street and just building relationships and yeah, all of those things. So it's been a shift for sure when I caught myself. And I didn't even know I was rebelling is the funny part. I was like, oh, yeah, once I caught myself, it was a pretty easy shift to make because I've always believed that we can learn from other people. I've never felt like I had all the answers or anything like that. I didn't know how far I'd swung in the opposite direction from the proving, pleasing, and perfecting, conforming side all the way to the other end to rebelling. So that was my recent catch in rebelling. Some other ways that it might show up for you is like if you find yourself always arguing or always playing devil's advocate, even if you agree, that's might be a sign of like rebelling of like, well, this is just my role. I got to push all the time, even if I agree. So that might be one way that you might rebel. Or like another one would be just refusing to have any type of traditional role. So whether that is as a woman, as a wife, as a mother, like to fulfill those roles of like what a woman is supposed to be. Like, I don't know, like as a wife, maybe the traditional notion is that the woman should do more cooking and cleaning. And so you just refuse to do those things, even if like it would work for your relationship and you and your partner are in agreement that it would be good to split it or to have you do more. You're pushing against that and rebelling against the traditional notion simply to push against it, not because it actually feels good to you or right to you. Another way would be like if you just kind of buck any trends that are out there. So like you don't read the best-selling book just because it's a best-selling book that everyone is reading, even though it maybe sounds kind of interesting, or you don't get the new kitchen appliance. You don't like buy the Instapot just because Instapot is popular, even though you're like, man, that sounds kind of cool. And I cook a lot of soup and pressure cook things and this, or I'm interested in that. And that might actually be really helpful to me. You like buck against it because you're like, no, everyone else is doing it. Therefore, I am not going to do it, even if it would actually be helpful for me. Or you like dress differently from like the norm, whatever that might be, wherever you live, whatever group you're in. You dress differently, you take a different career path, you pursue a non-traditional relationship simply because they are non-traditional and different, not because they're true to you. And this really is like the crux of like the second half of all these things that I'm talking about with rebelling. Like this is the crux of rebelling is like you're pushing against those rules and breaking them, even when it doesn't feel true to you to break them. And a woman living in grounded wildness, someone doing that might look like she's rebelling. Like, I think you could look at my life objectively from a high level standpoint and being like, is she actually rebelling in her life as a whole? I mean, I'm single. I'm not a mother. I don't live anywhere near any family members. I quit my more traditional corporate job to start a business. I spend a lot of time hiking. I play my guitar. I mean, I don't know, like I do own a home. So there's some things that I've done that are more traditional. And there are parts of my life, like I don't feel like I live a particularly alternative lifestyle. And yet when you look at some of the kind of check the box things, they're not in my life. They're not in my life. And yet I'm not rebelling against those things. I'm not rebelling against them. I am just listening to myself for what feels right to me. And so how do you tell that difference? Like I'm not rebelling. I'm living in grounded wildness. So how do you tell the difference for you between the two? It's really in the energy. Like you're the only one that's going to know. Are you rebelling and pushing against the rules? Or are you just listening to yourself and your own intuition and following that, which would be grounded wildness? Like that is grounded wildness. There's going to be times when you quote unquote conform to the rules, like you're doing it, you're following the expectations of what a woman is supposed to be, but you're doing it because it works for you, not to live up to some expectation. Like you're not proving, pleasing, and perfecting. You're doing it because it works for you. And then the opposite is also true. When you are breaking the rules, but you're breaking them because it feels good to you, that is grounded wildness also. That's not rebelling. That's not performing. And so what's interesting about all of this is like, I gave you the example of, my life might look like it's rebelling, but it's really not. It's just me following what I know is true and right in my own path for me. The opposite is also true. So there might be a woman out there living in the suburbs as a stay-at-home mom whose kids and husband and house are really her top priority. That is her top priority in life. And you might think, like just painting this picture of, the white picket fence and all of the things, that person might be the height of performing. Like they might be putting on a front, they might be proving, pleasing, and perfecting all over the place. But you don't know from the outside. Only that person can know from the inside, because maybe that is her true path. Maybe that is what feels good and right and authentic to her. I'm not going to judge that. And I don't think any of us should be judging that. This is an internal game. It's an internal game. Grounded wildness is an internal game. And only you know if you are living most of the time, at least, in grounded wildness, or if you are performing in your life and following a path that's not yours, whether that is performing through proving, pleasing, or perfecting, or rebelling. Only you can know that. Only you know. And you also know once you let go of it, once you let go of the performing, the freedom that comes on the other side of that freedom of grounded wildness. So now we've covered all 4 of these areas in the last 4 weeks about what performing is. And if you remember back to that first episode, I talked about how performing is really just anything that takes you away from you. It's that front that you put on. That's what performing is. Proving, pleasing, perfecting, rebelling, or if you have some other category for it, but you know that that's what it is, you are performing in your life, listen to yourself and listen to what those areas are. So where are you? Where are you performing? Maybe it's a little bit everywhere. Maybe there's one part of your life, like in a certain kind of relationship. Maybe you are performing more at work than you do at home. For some people, it's the opposite. Some people are performing and putting on a front more at home, and then they actually feel more authentic in themselves at work. Is there a place in your life where you feel like you have to live up to some standard that you are perfecting and proving? Like for me, I felt really confident and good in a good part of my life. But then when it came to my body and dating and feeling desirable, that was like just a wreckage of a disaster. That's where I felt like I had to perform because I felt like I wasn't worthy for what I was in that place. So where is that all true for you? In your life as a whole, or in just certain aspects of your life? Where are you performing? And only you can know. And the book, Grounded Wildness, will also help you to get there. It'll help you to recognize where you are performing and then to break free from it. And we're going to touch on that breaking free of it in our next podcast episode too, because I don't want to leave you hanging with like, here's all the downer stuff of how you're performing in your life. It's like, okay, now what does breaking free of it look like? What does breaking free of it mean? And I've used this word break a lot, and part of it's breaking free, but I also call in the book. So this whole section that we've been going through in the book is called the years of performing. And I give a lot of examples. There's self-reflection, there's stories, there's questions for you so you can better understand where you're performing and some deep ways that I haven't even shared in this podcast at all. Like we've barely scratched the surface, even though there were 4 podcast episodes on what is really like 30 pages of the book. We barely scratched the surface. The book dives so much deeper. But then part 2 of the book is called The Break. And it's called The Break because it is about breaking free, but it's also about breaking down, open, and through. I'm going to read a quote from Grounded Wildness from the book that is about this transition from performing to the break. You may feel this deeply. I know I did. So take a breath and listen to these words. And then you get tired of the weight of the armor you're wearing, no matter how pretty and perfect it may look. Tired of every single one of the rules you're carrying on your shoulders. Tired of the work required to keep up appearances. Tired of constriction, constraint, and contraction. Tired of performing your life. That's when you break. And this is, gosh, like emotion is coming up in me as I'm reading those words of like feeling the exhaustion of that and the pressure and the tiredness of carrying around that armor, carrying around that performing with you for so long, and then realizing I don't have to carry it anymore. When you get so tired that the only option is to let it go. And that's when you break. And that's what we're going to be talking about in the next episode. And my breaks were beautiful, wonderful and hard and harrowing experiences for me, but only freedom was on the other side. Only grounded wildness was on the other side. So yeah, that's what we're going to be talking about next episode, 2 weeks from now, not 1 week, because these 4 episodes in a row, they were great and they were a lot of work. So we're not doing that anymore. 2 weeks from now, about breaking free, breaking down, open and through into grounded